for Bitcoiners especially, there's that two wolves thing, because there's the side of us that looks at Bitcoin and wants to do these amazing things with Bitcoin, sees Bitcoin as the opportunity for amazing things to happen. And then on the other side, we're a bunch of hodlers who have holes in our socks and check engine lights on in our cars and sold all of our chairs. Because Bitcoin is so extreme, where buying $5 worth of Bitcoin today could mean that it's worth $500 in the future. It has this interesting effect where the opportunity costs are not merely there, they smack you in the face once you get it. We've long had jokes about Lambos. I honestly don't know of too many Bitcoiners who actually want a Lambo. That's really more of a crypto thing. I think it's actually illustrative of the actual mentalities of having a sound money savings vehicle versus having a debased fiat hyper-financialized system that you're working with.
You buy Bitcoin, you hold it for more than 4 years, Joe. That's my advice to everybody.
Fair to say you simply flooded the system with money?
Yes, we did. That's another way to think about it.
Where does it come from? Do you just print it?
We print it digitally.
I'm very bullish on the long-term viability of Bitcoin.
I was going to say, did that surprise you?
That surprised me how much that's gone up.
Hey, Internet, welcome back to another episode of New Foundations, the podcast brought to you by Acropolis, the Bitcoin Treasury company. As always, I'm in the studio with my co-founder, co-host, CEO of Acropolis, Chase Palmieri, and this week we are joined by none other than Michael Goldstein, aka Bitstein. Michael is a Bitcoin OG. I gave him that title, not him. And he's the president and co-founder of the Nakamoto Institute. Anyone who is deep down the Bitcoin rabbit hole like we are know the valuable work that the Nakamoto Institute has been putting out for, I believe, past a decade at this point. So very excited to have Michael on the show. Michael, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mason, thank you for having me. And to clarify, the Nakamoto Institute website was launched I think it was November 2014. So about 11 and a half years now.
Yeah, that qualifies as OG in my book. So, Michael, maybe I thought an interesting place to start would be if you could kind of retell the story of Diogenes. I was listening back to some of your previous presentations, and I thought that this was a really interesting story to maybe ground us in the discussion to come.
So I'm no classics expert. So if there is one listening, pardon me ahead of time. So Diogenes was a philosopher in ancient Greece, and he was notable because he basically lived in squalor purposefully, because he just wanted to sit around and think, and so he had great detachment from basically everything and just wanted to do his thing. And there's a story of Alexander the Great having met Diogenes, and Alexander the Great, of course, was in many ways the opposite, having conquered basically the known world all at a very young age, and so he was a man who had gone out and really done something incredible in that sense. So the story goes that when he met Diogenes, he said something along the lines of, "If I was not Alexander the Great, I would like to be Diogenes." Just in the sense of recognizing, it's like inside of us there are two wolves, and one of them is Alexander the Great, and the other is Diogenes, of wanting to conquer the known world, but perhaps on the other side just wanting to be on our own with sort of complete freedom. Because of course, if you're that kind of leader, you have a certain kind of freedom. You're very powerful, but you also have the burden of the crown. And Diogenes, being in his state, has no such burden. So he has his own kind of sovereignty in that sense. And so I just thought that was a cool story. And I think for Bitcoiners especially, there's a bit of that two wolves thing, because there's the side of us that looks at Bitcoin and wants to do with these amazing things with Bitcoin, sees Bitcoin as the opportunity for amazing things to happen. And then on the other side, we're a bunch of hodlers who have holes in our socks and check engine lights on in our cars and sold all of our chairs and so on and so forth. So there's this kind of funny dichotomy in the minds of Bitcoiners, trying to make sense of why we're hodling, what the goal is, what does that mean for how to live our life, and so on.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story. I enjoyed listening to you tell it in your other presentation, and it kind of reminded me of a kind of a famous quote that I'll misquote here, but it's along the lines of, if you don't want something, you already own it. And I think Bitcoiners, because of the store of value nature, it really rewires your brain in a way. And I was curious if you could maybe share a little bit about your two wolves, because obviously you are out very active in the space. You've influenced a lot of people from your earliest days till now. But you also, I believe, are living a very humble hodler's life. Can you maybe speak to how hard you're still hodling and stacking humbly yourself?
Nice try, IRS. But no, I mean, I think I've been involved in Bitcoin a long time, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't have any sats. But my actual life is a pretty modest life, and I kind of like it that way. For me, I think on a broader sense, there's this interesting thing that I think happens with Bitcoin, which is if you acquire Bitcoin, everyone's ultimately in it for the number go up. Many people want to pretend that there's some higher thing, but everything is tied to the number go up, including all of the other sort of virtuous things that we could talk about. But it's baked into that ability for Bitcoin to act as this long-term savings vehicle that people call, a store of value, etc. And one of the interesting things is, because Bitcoin is so extreme in its sort of potential, where buying $5 worth of Bitcoin today could mean that it's worth $500 in the future, and in the past there's also been that precipitous growth over time. It has this interesting effect where the opportunity costs are not merely there, like they smack you in the face once you get it. And so that's why a lot of Bitcoiners want to sell their chairs and all of that, is because they recognize that the opportunity costs of these different things is so extreme that you can go without for a bit if it means that in the future you have that much more. I think kind of having that sort of financial mobility is something that's attractive to basically anyone. But the interesting thing is, when you've denied yourself for so long, because it's like, well, every day you're making that decision of like, do I want to buy that thing, or do I want to just, save a little bit more money? Because you have that extreme opportunity cost, it answers that question way more in the affirmative for savings rather than spending. And I think over time, you get so used to not having something that in some sense it's like, well, do I really need that thing at all? I sense that's happened to me, and I think for a lot of Bitcoiners, that's why their minds start drifting towards higher things. You have a lot of Bitcoiners, myself included, that find interests in art and architecture, in various intellectual pursuits, perhaps for many different spiritual pursuits. And I think that's because there is this sort of detachment from the material. And it's funny, Bitcoin itself, it's this thing that we could all deride as greedy to want so much of it, and yet it itself is literally dematerialized. So even the thing that people are chasing for material outcomes itself is this. It lacks a material nature, and so I do think it sort of detaches people from more materialistic pursuits. We've long had jokes about Lambos and stuff like that, but I honestly don't know of too many Bitcoiners who actually want a Lambo. That's really more of a crypto thing. I think it's actually indicative of and illustrative of the actual mentalities of having a sound money savings vehicle versus having a debased fiat hyper financialized system that you're working with. And so with that, yeah, people start, kind of drawing their eyes a little higher and thinking about more than just sort of the material goods. And when you have that mindset, I mean, that's not to say that the only way to live is a modest one. And even the idea of modesty has to do with one's station in life. So in some sense, like, if Michael Saylor himself was living like Diogenes, in some sense, it actually could be a sort of immodest thing, because even though it would be taking something to the extreme, Diogenes himself was not, a wealthy man. And there was not, the world looking to him. He himself was sort of detached from all of the sort of social burdens that someone like Michael Saylor is not, by virtue of being someone who is a spokesperson, kind of speaking for the Bitcoin ethos. And so in that sense, if he was living like Diogenes, it would be a rather immodest thing. It's actually almost sort of a good thing that he's, has some level of, I don't want to say luxury, but, some of the stuff. I think of like the ship, that like nice ship that he'll have behind him in his library or office or whatever when he's speaking. It's like, that's actually sort of a nice thing that adds to, what it is to be Saylor the spokesman. So it's not that like, modesty itself is something that can mean a lot of things, but in many ways, having true humility. We all say stay humble, stack sats. Humility is about understanding the reality of things and how you actually fit into that. You don't imagine yourself greater than you actually are. And in other ways, you also don't imagine yourself as being lower than you actually are. You understand where you actually are, and the modest thing to do is then to present yourself in that actual station in life. And so as you sort of dematerialize, you detach, I think people start to get more in touch with a sense of that, and how they should actually live their lives accordingly.
Yeah, I don't think we'll see Saylor living in a barrel anytime soon. But speaking of Saylor, it's interesting because I wanted to kind of tie 2 points together. So you argue that hodling Bitcoin kind of maximizes the greater good, and that, everyone is better off when everyone is working in their own self-interest. And I'm assuming that applies to corporations and nation states as well. But I'm curious if following that logic, that hodling maximizes the greater good, if something like what Saylor has proposed that he intends to do, of burning his coins, his personal coins, not his MSTR coins, everybody calm down, his personal coins when he dies, if that is the greatest good, if that in fact in the Bitcoin space is the most noble final act, in your opinion.
Yeah, just as a side note, I guess people would finally get the proofs of reserves that they wanted if he went and burned the MicroStrategy coins. But so I talked a little bit about this this concept. It also brought up Diogenes. So for people who are interested in sort of my talk form of these ideas, they can check out a talk I gave called Hodl for Good. They can find it on YouTube. But I talked a little bit about this sort of broad concept is what do you do with these sats? How should you what should you imagine those sats as being for? And on the one hand, yes, we want to have them for long-term savings, but even the nature of savings implies that there is some kind of openness to future exchange. That's why you save, is for the purposes of being able to engage in future exchange if needed. So, what is it that you could direct yourself that actually has use for those sats in the future? If you're merely just holding them with no end at all, there is a sort of it almost doesn't make sense. Like, why are you holding it at all? But Michael Saylor, from what I've seen in the interviews, and he seems to have an interest in just burning his coins, like you said. So at the very end, he passes away, and his coins get burned, and so they just stay where they are forever. And what that would do is increase the marginal value of everyone else's coins on the network. And to him, that's seen as this great good, because then you're basically making the whole economy marginally wealthier in terms of the purchasing power that current holders of the money have. Where I would almost view that as a sort of baseline good thing, in the sense that with no other legacy planning, that does have that effect of every holder of Bitcoin then has a marginal increase in their purchasing power. So maybe they can do a little bit more with that. But what I argued in my talk was that, perhaps Bitcoiners should be spending more time thinking about, what it is that they actually want to see in the world, and, be actually building that world. And that's done through simply saving, because you're waiting to have more of something. Having more of something allows you to, just have more food to eat and sustain yourself, or just have it's always nice to have more than less, or developing capital goods. So the market doesn't just things don't just appear out of nowhere. It actually takes time and energy and resources to transform some resources into the resources you want, and there's a whole process of needing to do that. And so if there's something that you want out of the world, like for instance, if every Bitcoiner suddenly decided, it's like, oh, I want a nice house, and I want it to have a traditional architecture and some of this stuff, if they demanded that, there's only so many people who actually have the skills needed to produce houses of that style. And if the materials are a little different than what a lot of sort of fiat housing is made of, so, higher quality bricks or wood or, whatever it might be, you actually need the capital to be able to produce those inputs to building the house. So that's like an important thing. And then, the last thing that I talked about, I think there was something else actually, but one of the big things was leisure, and basically actually developing within your own mind through means of actually just resting from work and turning your mind to more contemplation, is actually being able to identify what is it that we're after here, like what actually pursuing art, philosophy, science, etc., so that you can sort of become more virtuous and have higher values than you did previously, such that whatever it is that you're asking for in the world, you're doing so at its highest good, or for its highest good. And I also brought up the virtue of magnificence, which is being able to basically make a sacrifice of wealth for the purpose of creating something great for the sort of common good. So the example I had starkly as an image of this was the cathedral in Florence, the famous Il Duomo made by Brunelleschi, which is just one of the great architectural outputs of mankind, but more specifically, the Renaissance. And that's something I pointed out. That's like, Bitcoin is this thing that we can treat as lasting forever, but our own Bitcoin, we can't necessarily think that way. We're going to die one day. Maybe we pass it down. Maybe we just burn it, in which case, like, your sats are done in terms of what those particular sats can be exchanged for. Or you leave it as inheritance, and over the generations, it's possible that it gets spent because different things come up, or some heirs are not as virtuous as maybe you wish them to be. Or it just gets diluted over time, and so it sort of just kind of goes out into the world. It's just like, by the 10th generation, everyone's getting like one sat, and it's not exactly moving mountains whenever you're passing down such an inheritance. Magnificence, this idea, it's an interesting one, because like the only people who can actually engage in magnificence is someone with a lot of wealth. And that's not because, poor people are incapable of virtue, quite the opposite. Everyone's capable of virtue, but that particular idea of magnificence is one that is defined by having wealth to sacrifice. And for that person, if you put your money towards, a great work of art, some great achievement of some kind, you're doing something that outlasts your own sats, because it's something that captures the minds and imaginations of everyone on Earth for time immemorial. So this is, Shakespeare's plays, or like I said, a great piece of architecture, or Beethoven or Mozart. Any of these people putting those things. In fact, I on a different podcast I had mentioned Mozart, and I looked it up afterwards, and Mozart, to our knowledge, his family doesn't really have any living heirs. So the Mozart family is sort of just this thing that's in history, and yet we have thousands of pieces of I think someone would have to tell me how many exact pieces we have by Mozart, but we still listen to them today, and even people who don't have much knowledge of classical music would almost automatically recognize and be moved by many of Mozart's pieces. And so that is a great work of magnificence, and that is something that you can be wanting to be saving up for, so that you can actually be participating in the creation of these kinds of great goods for humanity. And that doesn't mean that you have to burn all of your coins in the spending sense on these things. This could be part of a balanced portfolio of Bitcoin and awesome buildings or something. But the idea that perhaps that should be where people's minds are. To bring this back to Saylor, though, with just burning your coins as a baseline and increasing the sats, that's already kind of getting to that end game of the inheritance with the sort of dilution. So it's just sort of, it's a little bit of sats go to everyone, and everyone's a little bit, wealthier at that moment in terms of purchasing power. But on the other hand, if you do have a vision of what you want the world to be, there's nothing that, requires the market to actually fulfill that, except your own, actions, making it profitable for the market to do so. And there's also the need for those capital goods in order to make those things that you want. And so what I would argue is that if, while that's a baseline good, it is possible that if you have even higher goods that you seek to leave as a legacy to the world, there are a lot of other things that some proportion of your stack could be put towards that works towards those. So for people with family inheritance. You can try to raise children to have shared values with you, or build upon your values, in which case you're passing down money to them that is sort of being carried on with one or more clones of yourself. And if they continue to have children and continue to pass down these values that your family has, then you've expanded the human capacity to put those values to work in the world, which means all of the Bitcoins that you're also passing down as part of that legacy plan is being used to further those family values in the world. So if you have any feeling like your family has something to offer the world with their values and continuing to build those, it would be a little bit of a shame to, instead of kind of investing in that family structure, to just let it dilute into the market as a whole. And likewise, you could extend that to various institutions and other means of passing down that legacy and various businesses and so on and so forth. But the idea is that burning your coins is a sort of gift to the entire economy, in the sense of just the raw sats, whereas one of these other legacy plans, it's investing in more particular structures, but at the same time, there's something to be said that you could say it's like, well, if I give all the Bitcoins just to my children, then so and so across the planet, all 7.999 billion other people receive nothing from me. But I would actually argue very differently, which is, yes, they don't receive sats, but they can receive the outputs of those that you pass down the coins to, or the works that you created, because Mozart, like I said, he's not passing down any money to anyone, because there's no one left in that family, and yet the work still entered this sort of public domain that everyone still gets to receive as a gift. And so while you can say, oh, everyone gets a little bit of something, you have to look at the other side too, which is, what are the things that the world are not receiving because you didn't invest in the structures of production that could have made it possible. And it's hard to quantify the value of a lot of these works of art, or great philosophical ideas, or great scientific achievements, and so on and so forth. It can be hard to quantify the value, but at the same time, it's easy to forget just how valuable those are, and we should be considering that.
A podcast is going well when the guest is basically answering the questions that we had next. There's a reason why we didn't interject, because that was just so good. And I don't think I've had the chance to share this on the show, but it's a lot of these philosophical ideas are the reason why we call the company Acropolis. So the definition of Acropolis is a citadel or fortified part of an ancient Greek city, typically built on a hill. And to us, that hill, obviously we deal in Bitcoin and believe that our custody solution is a representation of that. But really, these are all philosophical values that we love discussing and very much agree with you. But which of these phrases resonates with you more, and why? Bitcoin is for your enemies, and everything is good for Bitcoin.
The way I am, I guess I kind of have to go with the last one, because I can see any phrase as carrying some nuggets of wisdom that we can use. So in that sense, both phrases are good for Bitcoin. So I guess I could jump into both of them. On the one of Bitcoin is for enemies, I think there's a couple important ways of looking at that. One of them is that Bitcoin is something that exists outside of us, and it's not something that we control. And that can be very difficult for people to wrap their minds around. And that's also what requires a lot of humility, is to recognize Bitcoin is not something that I'm here to push. As much as I've done a lot of Bitcoin evangelization over the years, and I think I've done a fairly good job of inspiring people to be a part of Bitcoin, I'm not the one who controls that. And ultimately, I'm just describing this external thing that's happening, whether anyone follows me, listens to what I say or not, whether I listen to myself or not, like any of these things, it's like it is on its own. And one of the things, because this requires us to sort of let go of a lot of feelings like we have control of stuff, one of those is that, you have control of your own Bitcoin. You have control of your own self and what you choose to do to acquire Bitcoin, what you want to, how long you want to save it, what you want to spend it on, what node version you want to run. All of these different things you have control over, but at the same time, so does everyone else. And so this can mean that people that you don't necessarily care for also have access to the same technology, and that is not something to try to fight so much as just recognize as a part of how this game works. And so it's important to recognize that there are going to be people in Bitcoin with wildly different interests, wildly different intentions, and these are all things that can exist within Bitcoin, even if they can cause sort of kind of local tension. On a global level, Bitcoin doesn't care, and it continues on. And I would say another side of that, though, is that in some ways, Bitcoin and that sort of idea, it's a good illustration, I think, of a principle that a lot of free market economists have tried to express for many, many years, centuries. I included a quote, and I'm not going to get it correct in this, but a quote from Frederick Bastiat from the 1840s or so, where he talked about that. It's like anyone who's doing something lawful in the market is in some sense acting in harmony with the rest of the market. So what I mean to say is that all these people, including people that maybe you don't care about, maybe it gives you a little pause when this or that government is suddenly interested in stacking the same thing that you wanted to stack because you were fed up with government control of money. You can still look at that and try to step out of things, look at it from this sort of objective, not just from my perspective, but from the perspective of the whole world, how to look at that and say, actually, the fact that all of these enemies are participating in this system that is designed with a certain nature. So it has a strict monetary policy that can't be debased. It has the ability to run your own node, so you can always do independent verification of everything. It allows you to hold your own keys, so you don't have to trust a third party unless you willingly engage in that relationship. You can always be certain of those aspects of it, and so a lot of these other people, you can instead think of, yes, it might not be pleasant for certain people to have access to Bitcoin and be using it in a way that you don't approve of, but you can also try to see in what ways are these actually beneficial to the economy as a whole. So maybe there's someone you don't like, and they are getting rich because they happen to know about Bitcoin very early, and they weren't a broke college student when they learned about it like I was, and they got to buy a bunch, and they're going to be super wealthy. And it's like, man, it's unfortunate. Like, why does that person I don't like, he gets to be a billionaire, and I'm just a humble pleb or whatever. At the same time, because that person's hodling, it's actually helping the value of your purchasing power and helping that increase. And you're actually doing the same for him. And so Bitcoin is for enemies is good at recognizing that, it's this thing that's outside of our control. But I would say that on the other hand, it's also in some sense a call to view Bitcoin and view a free market that is one that actually abides by proper rules of private property and free exchange and stuff like that. Is also a means for conviviality between parties who would otherwise be enemies, because they're even if they don't like each other, both of them participating in that system is making that system better for the others in that system sense. So I think that's a rather beautiful thing on both ends, because it requires, once again, that humility, but also trying to find where people might not be. You can say, oh, they're an enemy, but it's not because they use Bitcoin, or it's not because they have Bitcoin. It's just because you have some other disagreement. So it can create little bits of more conviviality than there would otherwise be. And the other one is, everything is good for Bitcoin. And I think this comes from a very, very similar mindset, which is effectively that Bitcoin is this thing that's kind of outside of us. And so when we have all of our day-to-day volatilities and our own ups and downs, and maybe even some kind of bigger macro ups and downs, the Bitcoin system as a whole exists sort of despite all of that. And so it's sort of important to always maintain a perspective that keeps that in mind, so that you don't think like every little thing that happens spells the end of Bitcoin, or is in particular the thing that makes Bitcoin moon, perhaps. But it's all part of a bigger show, and to have your eyes on the big prize instead of kind of getting lost in that day-to-day volatility of price and news items, and once again also see when we see negative things happen, there may still be silver linings that you can get out of it. For instance, when bad things happen, like a lot of Bitcoiners were upset by the Canadian trucker situation a few years ago. It's a negative thing that's happening in the world, but it also allows for us to now have kind of more ammo to demonstrate what it is that Bitcoin solves and why it's beneficial for people. And I think that happens for quite a number of events that happen in the Bitcoin world. There is sort of that wisdom that we can still glean even when there's stuff that we don't like happening. So both, I think, help us kind of maintain a rather stoic attitude, so that we can remain focused on what it is that we're actually trying to achieve.
Embrace the future of corporate finance with Acropolis, your strategic partner for a Bitcoin Treasury strategy. We're the experts your business needs. Acropolis offers trusted Bitcoin advisory. We provide you with an outsourced Bitcoin strategy officer, world-class research, and a creative financing team, and more, so you can navigate Bitcoin's market with confidence and acumen. Best-in-class custody with multi-institution custody. Eliminate the risk of loss while maintaining full control of real Bitcoin. Acropolis exclusively uses multi-institution custody as the safest and easiest way for businesses to hold Bitcoin. Bitcoin-only solutions. The Acropolis platform is designed for businesses of all sizes to seamlessly manage their Bitcoin treasury, and we focus solely on Bitcoin to offer you the most specialized services available. Adding Bitcoin to your balance sheet is just the beginning. With Acropolis, you're not just adopting Bitcoin, you're mastering its strategic use to create and maintain value for generations. Take the first step and start your corporate Bitcoin journey with Acropolis. Book your free consultation today at acropolistreasury.com/book and start implementing our proven strategies within days. What is a lesser known Satoshi writing that you find yourself thinking about a lot that you think the listeners of our podcast should know about, which, for context, we are speaking to founders, CEOs, treasurers, and folks that are looking into the Bitcoin treasury strategy that might not even know that there are public Satoshi writings.
Yeah, that's a very cool question, and the one I'm gonna just go off with the top of my head. I'm sure I could go back and dig in and find something that's sort of better than this. But the one that I would go off the top of my head is, when most people think of Satoshi unleashing Bitcoin on the world, they point to the very original email that he sent to the cryptography mailing list on October 31st, 2008, where he announced the white paper, and discussion ensued. But I think the better announcement, and really one of his just finest pieces outside of the code itself, in terms of his finest English contributions, was his announcement to the P2P Foundation mailing list. And it was in that one that I think he made a much clearer description of what exactly the problem we're trying to deal with is. And he basically says something about how we've had to trust banks with our currency in a way that they break that trust and they debase the currency, and we have to deal with all of those kinds of issues. And he makes it very clear that Bitcoin puts an end to that. And so that to me, especially going along with the white paper, because the white paper in many ways, it says a little bit of something about, we want to be able to do payments online without a trusted third party in the abstract. But the white paper is primarily a technical document that's sort of just laying out at a technical high level how technically Bitcoin does what it does. But even that, it's missing a lot of aspects that we take for granted in Bitcoin, such as the 21 million limit and some other stuff. So I think that, paired with the P2P Foundation announcement, does a good job of really having the both why and how. So the why of dealing with the debasement of currencies because of trusted third parties. And then the how of, well, broadly speaking, we have this blockchain with proof of work and digital signatures and UTXOs and all of that, and that's what allows us to solve that problem. So I think those together are very important, and I don't hear people talk as much about that announcement, and I think it's the more interesting one. I mean, we're only 16 years into this experiment now. So, it's still extremely early. So it'll be a very long time before we see the full fruits of his invention. We've only begun to scratch the surface of what Bitcoin means when it enters the world. And so, you have to really look into the future, and it's also a future that we're not going to be able to know. It's like, what are the full effects of Bitcoin? I'm not sure. But from everything that I know about money and about society and the importance of sound money for having a peaceful and prosperous civilization, to have a civilization itself, because good money is what allows a division of labor, which allows people to make things, so on and so forth, to have the excess time and resources to put their minds and efforts at higher things in the arts and sciences and so on and so forth. Money is foundational to civilization. It is one of the key pillars of a thriving civilization. And so I think that it's extremely possible. First of all, I'm very convinced that Bitcoin will succeed as much as we've been saying for a long time. And as we really see that come to fruition, I think that we will put Satoshi in the pantheon of some of the very greatest humans in all of history for that effect. I don't know that we could say that he would top kind of these sort of religious figures like Jesus or even, Muhammad or Moses, etc., because of just the sort of you're tapping into something higher than just economics when you're getting into that. But as far as kind of all of these inventions, all of the sort of political innovations, all of these sort of more kind of just natural human things, I think Satoshi would certainly be in the pantheon of those people. And so, yeah, I don't. We could go on the whole list. I'm sure people can come up with all the names, but he'd be with those people for sure.
You mentioned we're 16 years into the growth of this network. What do you want the legacy of the Nakamoto Institute to be? How do you want it to be viewed 160 or 1600 years from now?
Yes, so this goes into what I was saying about things like Magnificence, but also leaving a legacy. I mentioned how if you have a particular vision of things, then perhaps it's good to be able to leave something behind. It's sort of slow in its growth because it's primarily just me, but the fruits of the Nakamoto Institute that I would like to see is that I want it to be a place that people can go to learn about Bitcoin, learn about its importance, learn about all of the ideas, the sort of prerequisite ideas to fully understanding Bitcoin, whether that's Austrian economics or cryptography, or various various other strands of and schools of thought needed to make sense of it. But one of the phrases I love using is that we're trying to create generational knowledge for generational wealth. So the idea being that Bitcoin is this thing that we're going to be able to pass down to the generations. But just because people receive fire doesn't mean they necessarily know what to do with it. That is separate information that they also need to be given. You could receive fire and not know really what it is, and you end up putting it out and not knowing how to spark a new flame, in which case you've just lost it all, no matter how long that fire was being carried on. And so in the same way, it's us sitting here, we can talk about, this is why we run a node. This is why we hold keys. This is why 21 million Bitcoin isn't such an important limit, and so on and so forth. But new Bitcoiners, whether new people who are just getting into Bitcoin now, or literally future generations of Bitcoiners that haven't even been born yet, all of them are going to have to relearn this information in order to sort of uphold this thing and not let it go to waste, because Bitcoin is made up of the individuals that use Bitcoin ultimately, and so they need to. They need those values passed on with them. And so I would like to see the Nakamoto Institute be the Nakamoto Institute be an institution that is helping carry these values, this knowledge forward to future generations, so that we never find future generations taking Bitcoin for granted. And through that, our mission is to advance and preserve Bitcoin knowledge. And that's what I would like to do. I'd like to make sure that the next generation not only knows all of what we know about Bitcoin, so they cherish it the way that we do, but also that they have enough of that grounding that they can even continue to build on that with new ideas, and add to that stack of knowledge, so to speak, and advance our understanding as well. So that's my hope, and to me, it's one of the things that I hope I can look back and say that was a magnificent contribution to humanity. I still have. Hopefully I have a few decades to continue putting into that effort, and get to that point. So time will tell.
Well, Michael, week after week, I find myself thinking, wow, this might be one of the best podcasts that we've recorded yet. But we're just really lucky to be able to talk to the folks that we get to talk to, and I really appreciate all of the wisdom that you've shared throughout this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, I don't do it enough. I'm not a professional podcaster, but like the show, give it a rating, follow, subscription on whatever platform you're watching this on. But Michael, if they're not following you already, please let the folks know where to find you and the Nakamoto Institute. I know this whole conversation may sound to some like a giant advertisement for the Nakamoto Institute, but it is. Just kidding. It's a really great resource. I recommend it to everyone that is really deep down the rabbit hole and wants, primary high signal information. So where can they find it?
Yes, well, and thank you so much. And it's always like an honor and quite humbling that a website that I started when I was just a college student, just to kind of share the ideas that were exciting me, to see them have such a big effect on others it's just, like I said, it's an honor. People can find the website. The Satoshi Nakamoto Institute is at nakamotoinstitute.org. You can find me on X at Bitstein, and the Nakamoto Institute is Nakamoto INST on X. And if you search around for those, you can also find them on Nostr, or you can go to the website and click around, and you'll find the Nostr and pubs. You can go read and study the large archives of Bitcoin content from Bitcoin's prehistory and continuing on into now. We have some podcasts like The Reorg, where we're kind of discussing a lot of that old content in the context of what we've learned so far and where things are today. You can go check that out, and those will be available. You can find that content on YouTube, on Rumble, on whatever podcast app of your preference. Please check it out, and keep in touch with me and the Institute, and let me know what more I can do to help bolster this mission of advancing and preserving Bitcoin knowledge.
Well, cheers. Thanks again for coming on, and I'll see you around Austin.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the show. Quick reminder that New Foundations is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing should be construed as investment, financial, or legal advice. Business owners, business operators, and those who are Bitcoin curious, let's connect. Visit acropolistreasury.com to learn more or to get in touch with our team.